listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
We get to talk about expanding the Spanish footprint. What does that mean? We're going to talk about ministry to Spanish-speaking people and learn more about that and learn more about how pastors and others can serve in the Spanish language. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting The Coffee Hour. You can find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, the Reverend Ted Cray. He's LCMS Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. Pastor Cray, welcome back to The Coffee Hour.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Looking forward to learning more about the work that you're doing in the Dominican Republic and all of Latin America and the Caribbean. And also joining us today, the Reverend David Mummins. He was a participant in the recent Expanding the Spanish Footprint program. Pastor Mummins, welcome.
Good morning.
So, Pastor Cray, tell us about the need for Spanish-speaking pastors who understand the culture in which they would be serving.
Yeah, actually, I represent the mission of the church internationally, not on the national side. But in our last synodical convention, we noted that over a dozen of our district presidents had cited a acute shortage of Spanish-speaking pastors to serve in their districts. So we took up the challenge here in the Dominican Republic. And since we already had a language institute that prepares our missionaries to learn Spanish, we thought, boy, why can't we just join hands with the national side of the church and create an opportunity here where perhaps some of our Anglo pastors who find themselves surrounded by Hispanic neighbors and a desire to reach out to them might just consider coming here to study Spanish. So that was sort of the genesis for the whole concept of finding a route to help our Anglo-speaking pastors find a way to reach out with the gospel to their neighbors.
Why is cultural training with language skills particularly really important in ministry?
Well, sir, as you know, learning a language is just the key to entering into culture, finding out one's views on life, death, marriage, family, children, work, and a whole host of other things. So being able to speak opens up to you an entire new way of life. And with around 50 million Hispanics now living in the United States, this makes the United States the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. And being able to pick up Spanish opens up to an entire world of folks with fascinating way of looking at life by getting to know them through their culture.
Could you give us an example of what that might have been like for you or other missionaries that you serve with? I know that language training is certainly a part of training for many missionaries before they deploy or as they're deploying, but how is understanding the culture such an important part of what you do as a missionary or those that you lead as a regional director? How is maybe an example of what that learning that culture is like?
Sure. Well, just an anecdotal funny story. When I was learning Spanish in Guatemala, we did not have a language institute back in that day. So the church sent me to Guatemala, the city of Quetzaltenango, and that was in the highlands, about 3 hours away from the capital, the city of Guatemala. And daily studying Spanish, I felt like I had learned enough to go and get some film for my camera developed. This was in those archaic days when things weren't digital just yet. And I had kind of practiced in my head and written out this little conversation I would have with the man in the Photoshop to develop my film. Walked in, I said, "Buenos dias." He said, "Buenos dias. ¿Cómo está? Bien. ¿Y usted?" Beautiful. Going just fine. I think even you're tracking, Andy. And then, then he said, "¿Cómo se llama? What's your name?" I said, "Teodoro." And he sort of crossed his arms, looking a little bit sideways at me. And he looked at me a little more acutely and he was like, "¿Cómo te llama?" And I said, with emphasis, because I know my name, Theodore, I said, "Teodoro." And now he was rather, as they say in Spanish, bravo. He was looking really consternated. And he said, "Mira, chico, una vez más te voy a preguntar. One more time, I'm going to ask you, ¿cómo es tu nombre? What's your name?" And I said with great emphasis and flair, "Te adoro." But of course, it's Te odoro. I was telling him I loved him instead of telling him my name. So, you know, you just learned how to tell someone you love them, te adoro. Now, if you'd like to call me by name, it's te odoro. So you don't get too far into culture if you don't learn the basics about language, you know? And
Great
I
example.
always tell our missionaries, you really want to beef up your Spanish because your level of ability to speak is often equivalent with your level of happiness. If you're asking for bologna across the meat in the meat market and they give you a salami, you're not too happy about that. So working at Spanish opens you up to a world of wonderful conversations with folks who have fascinating things to share with you.
And that relationship between the language and the culture is so interconnected as well. Being
Absolutely.
able to, I mean, just in the example that you gave, it one letter makes all of the difference
All of the
between
difference.
telling somebody something maybe potentially super awkward and just
Right.
telling somebody
Right.
your name. So understanding just all of those intricacies is so important. This is such an exciting opportunity. Tell us more about this expanding the Spanish footprint program.
Sure, sir. So we have like 4 components. And the first one, obviously, we just hit on learning the language. The second is our chaplains here offer a course that Pastor Mummins had the opportunity to be the first one to be a part of on religious currents in Latin America, giving folks a kaleidoscope of opportunity to see what the panorama of religious currents look like across Latin America, going back to the 1500s and coming somewhat up till today. Pastor Mummins can speak to that. And then the third component was or is to be able to go out and make evangelistic visits with our seminarians in order to get to know perhaps what a home might look like in this corner of Latin America. And then the fourth is learning basic rites like baptism and the quinceañera, celebrating when a young woman celebrates her 15th birthday, weddings, and perhaps, as in the case of David, Pastor Mummins, the opportunity to participate in some services. We're going to be rather disappointed with all of our participants after him. He was exemplary, just jumped in and really took advantage of his time here. But those are the 4 basic components. And we don't think by somebody coming to study here in the Dominican that that's representative of all of our countries in Latin America or even typical, but it's meant to give them a smattering of a small foretaste of what the larger life across Latin America, Caribbean looks like.
Mm. Yeah, how does that add an extra layer to this training and learning for these pastors being able to come to the Dominican Republic? How does that build on what they're learning?
Yeah, perhaps something that might be helpful, and I'd be curious what Pastor Mummins thinks about this, but being able to do your language and culture learning alongside a Lutheran church or at least mission in action, I think gives one a visual on perhaps what a Hispanic ministry might look like, or at least open one's eyes towards the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of, what our participant might want to do as they begin to serve their Hispanic neighbors with the gospel.
I can really appreciate that. The training isn't saying this is exactly what it's going to look like in your community, but this
No.
can open your eyes to what it might be like in
Sure.
your community as you learn the language, learn the culture, and just learn about culture in general, how it can vary from place to place.
And quite obviously, Andy, the United States is very unique in that, say, here in Latin America, we're privileged with serving one people group, like in this case, the Dominicans, or if we have missionaries in Guatemala, they serve Guatemalans. The United States is rather unique because you have individuals who are Hispanic, they happen to speak Spanish, but they come from many different countries with unique cultures, different ways of eating. Certainly, there's things that are shared amongst those countries, but a Chilean will tell you they're quite different from a Mexican, who will say they're different from a Brazilian, who will say they're still different from a Venezuelan. And in the States, of course, doing Hispanic ministry is a kaleidoscope. You have a variety of people in the same neighborhood who might come to your country, to your mission, and suddenly you find yourself multinational, because Hispanic is not one country. That's a rather expansive term for a large people group across many countries.
So, to speak to that, I just learned when I went down to the Dominican, I knew that a large portion of my community was Mexican, But now that I'm able to talk with more people, I've learned that there's also Guatemalans and Nicaraguans and some folks from Paraguay here as well. And that's not something that I'd ever realized before. And so now it opens up a new opportunity to be able to interact with people more like how they're used to interacting in their home cultures.
We're talking with Pastor Ted Cray and Pastor David Mummins, learning about expanding the Spanish Footprint program and learning about ministry to those in Spanish-speaking cultures. We'll continue the conversation in just a moment. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
At Concordia University, Wisconsin, we believe you were created for a reason: to use your God-given gifts to help others, to live a life of self-sacrifice in a me-first world, to live a life that's uncommon. Whether you're taking one of 50-plus online programs or learning with us in person on the shores of Lake Michigan, you'll be equipped to make an uncommon impact. Learn more at cuw.edu. Concordia University, Wisconsin. Live uncommon.
Oh, this wooden toy set is really fun.
It is.
We could pretend it's like real life.
Kids love to play, and play that points to Jesus is a big part of a child's faith journey. Wooden toys from Wicking Vicar do just that, growing the faith through play. Wicking Vicar's Children's Church Play Set lets little ones delve into the divine service, and the Children's Advent Wreath is a safe way for kids to make the Advent tradition their own. Solid wood and heirloom quality for children ages 3 and up. Order yours today at wickingvicar.com and click on Wooden Toys in the menu bar. This Christmas, gift the children in your life faith-building wooden toys from Wicking Vicar.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Sarah Gulseth.
I'm Andy Bates.
We're talking with the Reverend David Mummins, who participated in the recent Expanding the Spanish Footprint program, and also the Reverend Ted Cray, LCMS Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, talking about this really amazing program, learning Spanish language and culture in the Dominican Republic. And before we went to the break, Pastor Mummins, you were just giving us a little glimpse of what the program, the opportunity that you had in the program. Can you tell us a little bit about the community where you serve?
Yeah, so I'm in central Minnesota in a small farming town, about 3,500 people. And we're famous for our turkeys, I guess, as we're near Thanksgiving here. Production is running up. Lots more people in town work at the plant. But about 25-30% of the town is Latino and Hispanic. And our congregation was not happy that we weren't able to reach out to them. When you can't talk to a third of your neighbors, and you can't help people learn about the gospel and about Christ, that's a challenge. And so now that I've been through this program, we're excited to get to go and to reach out and to share the comfort that we have in Christ and the hope that we have with real people who have real needs. And it's just an exciting thing for us to be a part of now.
So tell us about your experience and participating in Expanding the Spanish Footprint. What are some of the things that you learned in your participation?
It's hard to describe just how much I learned. It was I had at least 4 hours of like formal classroom Spanish instruction each day when I was there, and I got to participate in services and go on visits with pastors and go to confirmation classes and just so much. And it was great to be able to sit down and role play pastoral situations. So I would go into class with my instructor, and her name's Nellie, and she would be like, "Okay, today I'm going to be someone in the hospital who has pneumonia. How would you interact with me?" And then she'd start speaking in Spanish, and I'd have to start interacting with Spanish and running through that. Or the next day, then my daughter got pregnant without being married, and I'm coming into your office to talk about it. What do we say? And just going through, real pastoral situations and to practice it in a safe place with people who are Lutherans and who approach scriptures and approach these kinds of things in the same way. That was just unbelievably helpful to be able to do that. And also being forced to have to speak Spanish. It's one thing to go through computer programs and to learn. Like I've been studying on and off various computer programs for years. but they teach you Spanish, but they don't teach you how to speak Spanish. And as Pastor Cray said earlier, with his name, my name's Theodore, or I love you. It's very different when you're actually speaking things out loud. And to have that boost of confidence, being forced to interact that way, was just more helpful than I can describe.
Yeah, there's no little cheat codes when you're actually in a conversation with somebody and you have to just say something and learn as you go.
Right. Yeah.
I can imagine how important that was for you. Who are some of the people that you got to meet and learn alongside, and also going into the neighborhoods, being able to meet people? Tell us about the relationships that you were able to build.
Yeah, so I formed a pretty close relationship with one of the mission pastors, Pastor Roberto Weber, and his wife, Katie. They kind of adopted me and took me into their home. All of the missionaries were very, very welcoming there. And then Pastor Fritzler was also very, very welcoming. I went on a number of visits with him to go and, as he was going and seeing people in his congregation, people who were covering in hospitals and people who were in need, and just to go and to see that the work that that I do up here as a pastor is very, very similar to the work going on in the Dominican as a pastor. And then to learn how to say the words in Spanish and how to not just speak, but to care, and the different cultural aspects of caring. Up here in the North Country, it's kind of hands off, a firm handshake and head nod, as opposed to a Latin American culture of giving hugs and a kiss on the cheek when you meet someone. And to learn that those kinds of expectations and changes has been a helpful thing. So I went to a grocery store here in town, a Latino grocery store, and then being able to do a proper greeting and say the right words in Spanish was just the look of surprise and like excitement on the shop owner's face was just, it was amazing to have that kind of connection.
So what did you buy?
I bought plantains so I could go and make some Dominican mango, which is like mashed potatoes only made with plantains. That was a lot of fun.
You're coming along, Pastor. You're coming along.
See, it's more than just learning a language, right?
It is culture, which means food.
I mean, food is a love language. So,
and so like, as far as the culture goes, like one of the things that's important to us is we don't just want to offer a German, Northern Scandinavian service in a different language, but we want to offer a Spanish service in a Spanish language. Something that would feel like you're worshiping God back your native country kind of thing. And to be able to help ease that transition as you're becoming more and more Americanized being up here. My challenge with learning like theological words and how to have theological conversations, it goes both ways. When you move up to the United States and you're trying to learn English, learning the theological words and theological conversations is just as hard. I had a lady come into my office about a year ago. I'm asking to get her son baptized, and she didn't know how to ask that in English, and I didn't know how to ask that in Spanish or talk about that. She was great and perfect English otherwise, but didn't know how to say, can you pray with me? Can we get him baptized? And things like that. And so to have the cultural ability and the language ability to speak those words, even with people who speak fantastic English, better than I do at times, honestly, was just a huge, huge blessing.
You mentioned earlier that your congregation wanted to be able to reach out to your Spanish-speaking neighbors and were disappointed because of the language barrier. And so now you've participated in expanding the Spanish footprint. That's certainly helping in one way. How else is your congregation learning to reach and serve your Spanish-speaking neighbors?
Yeah, so a number of things we're trying to get started. We've started publishing a few basic words and phrases in our bulletin. So when people are out and about town, they can have, a friendly, hi, hello, my name is kind of thing with people as they're going around. If you're going for a walk around town and there's a family sitting on their porch playing with their kids, you can say, hi, my name's David and it's nice to meet you and glad to see you here, that kind of thing. We're also hoping to offer an English as a second language class. And then we also want to do a Spanish as a second language class. So we bring together people who want to learn English and people who want to learn Spanish as a way, as a safe place to learn and interact with one another. And of course, that brings food. We're already talking with maybe trying to bring some food trucks in and that kind of stuff. But we're going to, maybe Dominican mango and other things will be on the table. We'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, it's not so much we have specific things in plan. It's just we want to do the things we're already doing, just in another language too.
How has your congregation changed since you've been able to participate in this program and bring back the learning that you were able to do? How has your congregation changed? Has the culture changed at all of of being more inspired to reach out into the community?
I'd say there's definitely a lot more excitement, a lot more excitement in wanting to be involved, not just in the community, but in the church. More people coming to meetings, more people coming to worship services regularly. It's a rallying around a cause that there is a need, and we can do it. And with the Holy Spirit's help, we're going to make it happen. It's been tremendous to see the growth in the congregation as people are trying to be involved any way they can, even if they don't know how to speak a word of Spanish. They're like, well, I can serve plates for this after the service or whatever, or I can hand out bulletins and say "Hola, bienvenidos," that kind of thing. Yeah, it's been pretty great.
Pastor Cray, obviously this was a very beneficial program for Pastor Mummins. Are there more opportunities coming up in the future as well?
Yeah, so there are. You can contact Erin.alter@lcms.org, Erin.alter@lcms.org, and she would be happy to field your questions and inquiries and be able to speak to cost, timing. But we do offer this 3 times a year for anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 weeks of duration. January 15, June 15, and September 15. Those are the 3 times of the year we're kind of on and ready to receive individuals. Additionally, for those who think 3 to 6 weeks might be a long amount of time, we are offering this year our first short-term team who would come to learn Spanish and culture in August. And you could also contact Erin Alter again about that inquiry as well if you're interested, in order to have the opportunity to, say, do a crash week in Spanish. But those are at least 4 different opportunities where folks can engage. At this point, for the Spanish footprint, we're open to pastors as there's a critical need in that area. I'm sure as we move through this and expand our capacity with more teachers and the like, we'll be glad to open this up to other church workers and folks from all parts of the church. But we also have both seminaries looking to participate now in the summer with students. So we've filled up pretty quickly, but don't be dismayed. We'd be glad to have you get in line and we'll find a place for you.
What other eligibility requirements are there for any of the opportunities that you've talked about? I know the expanding the Spanish footprint, that is for pastors. What other eligibility requirements are there?
Essentially, obviously, you need assistance from your congregation to be able to be away for a period of time. It's helpful, of course, if you've already talked with your folks about the need that you have because of your neighbors who are all around you. And ultimately, funding is also something that needs to come into place. My understanding is some districts are willing to assist with this. We've already had a couple who have told their pastors that they're more than willing to help because it does mean a new church plant or at least a new ministry. So I'm sure one can reach out to the district president. There's also Reverend Stephen Heimer, who's in the church planning unit and on the national side of the office. I think he is also well aware of this program and happy to have a conversation. Whether he has money or not, you'll have to ask him that question. And then, of course, on the other side, for anyone who would like to join our short-term team in August, that's open to anybody. As always, if you can do Rosetta Stone or Duolingo or something of that, like even a Spanish college course, high school course before you come, you'll get that much more out of it, having put some time in to picking up the basics.
Pastor Mummins, your advice or your thoughts for your fellow pastors who might be in similar communities wanting to reach their Spanish-speaking neighbors, what recommendation would you have for them?
Definitely try. Even if you don't know a lot of Spanish, there is this just appreciation for pastors who put in the effort, or anybody put in the effort to try to speak a little bit of Spanish and what you know. Real quick, for my wife went to the bakery and was trying to say hi, can I get by a donut in Spanish? And the baker was like, you know what? This is now a place where you can learn Spanish. Come here and we'll try together and I'll help you learn Spanish. And so that's been a thing all over our community, and I'm sure it's true most places, that just putting a little bit of effort, it goes a long way.
You can learn more about the program also at servenow.lcms.org. That's servenow.lcms.org. Our guest today, Pastor David Mummins, participant in the Expanding the Spanish Footprint program. Pastor Mummins, thanks so much for being our guest.
Thank you.
And Pastor Ted Cray, LCMS Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. Pastor Cray, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
You've been listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit kfuo.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@kfuo.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.